Hey, welcome everyone to another episode of Think Engage Thrive here on E360 TV. And as usual, we're bringing you innovative entrepreneurs, great ones, guys that are cutting edge of ideas. Obviously, we've spoken a lot about AI, we've spoken a lot about marketing technology, but tonight we have Mark Osborne. And Mark was recognized by AdAge magazine as one of the top 25 technology marketing trailblazers. He's written books. He's helped clients scale to millions of dollars. So he really understands marketing technology. So he's an entrepreneur in that world. And any of you who've done anything, I don't care. And you've heard me say it on this show, because what frustrates me sometimes about entrepreneurs or about people that develop a new product or a new item, I don't care whether that product is a SaaS product or a physical product, they always focus on the product and they forget about the marketing and building the brand and doing all the things that are necessary to sell that product. And so people like Mark, myself, cut from the same cloth, where we focus on marketing to build brands and to grow. So he's got a company called Modern Revenue Strategies, and he focuses on really growth of sales, growth of profits. He does a lot of work on the B2B side, whereas in my world, I'm more on the direct to consumer side. We focus more on e-commerce, but nonetheless, it's all important stuff, and we do some B2B stuff. So we share a lot of similarities, but the process is the same. The fundamentals are the same. And the reality is you get nowhere. I don't care what kind of business you have. You get nowhere if you don't market it correctly. And focusing too much on the product is diverting your attention from building a brand. And I don't care whether that brand is B2B, B2C. I don't care if it's what kind of brand it is, but building a brand is far more beneficial than just focusing on the product. So I think I've done a decent job of introducing him. So let's bring Mark in now and let's get into what he does and who he is. How you doing, Mark? Thanks for joining us.
I'm good, Phil. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks for that really warm introduction. I appreciate that.
Hope I didn't butcher it too badly.
Not at all. Not at all.
All right. So, I gave an introduction about what you do, but let's take a step back. Why don't you give the viewers a bit of history, a bit about you, how you got into what you were doing? Because everybody's got a path. Everybody's got an entrepreneurial path that they started with. A lot of people had a choice. They came to a fork in the road, so to speak, where they could have gone to work for a company, or they can do it themselves and be an entrepreneur, which is not always the easiest route. So
sure.
I'd love to hear your story.
Awesome. Thanks for asking that. It's actually a bit of a funny story. I sometimes people will give me a little bit of trouble for this microphone because it's such a sort of classic music microphone. But I actually got my start in marketing from playing in and managing bands. So some of your listeners may be as old as me and might remember that in the early days of the internet, people didn't have access all the time. You couldn't go there every day. In fact,
right.
People kind of treated it like a billboard, like those billboards that used to be at the grocery store where someone would put a sign up like, get guitar lessons, and people would peel off the thing and like take it with them. That's kind of how the internet worked in the late 90s when I was first getting into it. And so I was managing bands around the Southeast. And so I would go on to these, they were called Usenet billboards, and people would say, hey, I've got Dave Matthews Band playing in Birmingham. I've got the bootleg concert tape that tells you how old it was. And so I started building databases of people that liked Dave Matthews and lived near Birmingham. And their email address was their username, because there was no such thing as spam at the time. People wanted you to have their email address.
Right.
So I would email all of these folks when one of my bands that sounded like Dave Matthews went to Birmingham. And so I was selling out concerts for little unknown acts really early, which led to a job at a radio station and led to a job at a record label and ultimately in a career in marketing. And it was really interesting, those early days of internet marketing, or interactive marketing, we used to call it. Was all about, sort of leveraging data and technology to sort of connect brands and consumers at scale. A lot of it, though, was really focused on exploiting little, gaps in the algorithm, or, early days of search engine optimization. SEO was, stuff all the keywords in there, but
Yeah.
no, you don't want your readers to see the stuffed keywords. So use white words on a white background, and then the search engines will think you've got all this content, and your consumers will get a nice, pretty interface. But it was all about sort of gaming algorithms. And I got really deep into that. You called out earlier, that AdAge magazine said I was one of the best people in the world at using data and technology for marketing. And a lot of that early career was about, outsmarting the house, cheating, finding cheat codes, growth hacking.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I started to realize was it was hard to keep up. You probably know the MarTech conference, the Scott Brinker and those folks. They put out a landscape that's got like all the different companies that make a technology for marketing, provide data for marketing. And when they first started doing that, I want to say kind of, 2011, 2014, there were about 150 companies on that little landscape. This year, there's more than 10,000.
Yeah.
So it's really impossible to companies to keep up with that pace of change. And I realized that, you could not be a successful marketer in this landscape by just, finding one exploit or finding one trick, one growth hack, and using that. And instead, the companies that I admired that were really doing good work were the ones that were building systems. And then they were layering into those systems technology to make it work faster, better, overnight, without human error, data to help it work faster, better, more precise. But it really was the system that led to the success. And you mentioned the book. The book that I put out last year is all about how to build those systems to do a better job of attracting more of the right prospects for your business, to do a better job of accelerating those best prospects through the sales pipeline, and then a better job of activating your existing clients for faster renewals, larger upsells, more referrals. And it's all about how modern businesses build systems and then layer in data and technology to find those exploits and really maximize their outcomes.
Yeah. No question. We got started, or I did, starting businesses early on, and in the early days, it was really all about if you got the right URL.
That's right.
Because there wasn't really a lot of search engine type stuff. There wasn't any Google ads. There wasn't, but you're right. Keyword stuffing, white words, white background, no doubt about it. That was a trick that everybody did.
It's funny you talk about URLs. I always think about like the death of the clever name. Like I feel like in the 80s and like even early 90s, like sort of clever play of phrase or turn on words was like, a really fun way to, name your business. But then once you had to have a URL that matched your business name, and people were like, does he mean to success? As in the numeral, or TO or TOO or TWO, then it became, sort of impossible to have those clever names and be successful anymore.
Yeah. Well, I think that some of that is coming back. You have people trying to get around, because there's a lot of guys who went out and just registered a million URLs, and nobody wants to pay $10,000 or $100,000 for a URL anymore. So they do try and come up with clever names or clever spellings and ways around having to buy that URL. So I do think that there's some of that, but I understand exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, now the clever is, I guess the most in vogue thing is just remove all the vowels.
Yeah, exactly.
So like mixture is just MXTR mixture.
Yeah. What's the watch one? Movement. MVMT.
Oh yeah, MVMT.
Yeah. Take all the vowels away. Movement.
That's right.
Yeah, so that's always fun. We do a lot of that with people trying to come up with brands and come up with brand names where you can get the trademark and the URL, and sometimes you have to be a little bit creative, but it is fun. So when you talk about your book, let's see the book again.
Sure. Yeah. The title is "Are Your Leads Killing Your Business?"
So that's
Well,
primarily focused B2B, right?
that's right. And really B2B that operates in a specific kind of market dynamic, which is folks that are chasing large contracts, which typically then means that there's a number of people involved in the buying committee. There might be a decision maker and like a technical influencer, maybe a champion. And then when you get more people involved, that stretches out the timeline on making decisions. And that sort of market dynamic has some really specific challenges to it. And so the book is written with that sort of company in mind, companies that are playing in that space, and tailored a lot to sort of boutique professional services firms, early stage SaaS or technology companies. Today, all services have technology underneath them, and all technologies have services on top of them. So it's kind of hard to think of them as separately, but a lot of those businesses, that are working on annual contracts, or at least, longer than just, you bought a thing from me, those type of engagements, they have some specific challenges there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Outreach, I think today, in general, has challenges. I think that a lot of what's happened in the past, because
You,
when you talk about technology, right, you're talking really about the tools that you're using to outreach in different forms. Am I wrong?
it's both that as well as using it for, like, we do something for predicting churn. So, if you've got a company that's got, maybe 100 customers, and you're, trying to identify which are the ones that are likely to churn, you can use some technology that will
Yeah.
bring in some data and signals about, well, when was the last time they logged into the platform, and what did they do the last 3 times they logged into the platform? And can we get some external intent data that shows that they've actually been out researching, other sort of replacement solutions? We build that into a predictive model that is then essentially assigns a score against all 100 companies, and you can see, wow, these are at high risk of churn, and maybe that's okay. Maybe we're okay with them churning out because we brought them in on an old contract structure and they're not that profitable. Or maybe if we lose them, we lose the business. And so you can kind of use some of that technology to identify. And then, of course, there's tons of ad tech and marketing technology out there to help you do a better job of, finding those audiences and, optimizing in real time against those audiences that are generating, either the highest quality of lead or have the highest predicted lifetime value. Again, using some tech to make those predictions.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's the same thing really on direct to consumer. It's just a little bit different in what technology you're using,
That's right.
or the tools that you're using. And the customer base is generally bigger. But I find, because obviously we're working for clients trying to get more customers, right? Because we're in the e-com space, right?
Yeah.
And so we're looking always for tools that are going to help us find and harvest new customers to buy a product. But then on our side, we have to continue to grow. So we're out on the B2B side trying to find new clients that we can do this with. And I found that we used to have a system, right? We'd bring in lists and for prospects, and obviously they got scored, and we would write beautiful emails, give them something like, an on-demand webinar, a book that a free book that you download, all those tools. But I've seen in the last, really since COVID, and I hate to blame everything on COVID, but since COVID, I think that the world has changed. I think it's so much more difficult today. And I think part of the problem is people get inundated with outreach emails. And so it becomes, unless you do something really spectacular. So,
Yeah, you're absolutely right. In fact, that was a lot of the sort of catalyst for writing the book, was that, having worked in the space for, more than 20 years, I saw that a lot of companies, especially in the B2B space, when the lockdowns happened from COVID, they kind of put a pause on their normal marketing activity, and they, maybe did an extra webinar or two. But other companies really leaned into, how is this changing the landscape? How is this changing the dynamic? McKinsey actually says that the COVID lockdowns accelerated some trends in B2B marketing and sales by more than 10 years in less than 10 months. So if you think, like, there's this trend line of, well, people are getting more expecting that they can shop on your website without having to talk to a salesperson. So now that the shape of that curve goes up like that, a whole lot of companies still have and if you'd like to learn more, please fill out this form, and then we'll call you back on our timetable when it's convenient for us. Whereas their competitors turned it into, if you'd like to learn more, here is everything you could possibly want to learn. So we'll make that all available for you. You don't have to give us your email address if you don't want to, because we built in technology on the back end to use your IP address to identify what company you work for. And then we've built in another data provider that finds all the people that are likely to buy our products that work for that company, and you're already in our CRM system. And so all of that back end kind of infrastructure are the things that the winners were doing. And that's those systems that help them to identify those best possible opportunities. Whereas a lot of, even sort of established players just sort of assumed when the lights came back on, they'd be able to go back to, well, hey, here's an ebook, just fill out the form and we'll get back to you. The world just changed.
Oh, sure. I think it also changed on the front end for companies like us, because there was that period of time where everything was sort of restricted. Like, so we obviously, again, e-commerce, we have clients that are selling on Amazon, selling on Walmart.com, selling on their website, but couldn't couldn't get the product, couldn't get the raw materials to make the product. Amazon restricted certain categories because they were so focused on health and wellness and baby and all the critical things, because everybody was trying to fill their pantries. So it became a real challenge. And absolutely, we backed off of doing outreach, but we never really did it the normal sort of way. We were always trying to do something a little different, because I look at it the same way that I would preach to a client. If I preach to a client and I say, how are we going to break through the clutter? Like, what are we going to what's the message that we're going to say that's going to get somebody to want to buy your product, your pasta sauce over somebody else's, your hot sauce over somebody else's, your jeans over somebody else's jeans? And so we sort of take that same approach when we do things. But even that today is really, really difficult. I think it takes more touch points than ever before.
For sure. And not only more touch points, but just as you say, doing a better job of really understanding the customer's context, like their immediate context in this very moment. So it's not just, why is your hot sauce better? Well, because it's hotter. But it's, why is it better for them today in this moment that they're experiencing? Because customers have just, really come to demand that layer of, I don't know if it's customization or just, sort of really personalization that comes, because there's also, and I'm sure you've seen this more than anyone, in the rise to direct to consumer products, there's so much more variety. So I can find a hot sauce that, has a certain flavor. So there, now there's a million of them that are all at the same heat level, and I can get them that have more of a smoky flavor or more of a vinegar-based flavor. And I'm not an expert in hot sauces, so I don't know the vectors of choice that people use there. But no,
you're fine. It's flavor. It's about flavor now.
That's right. But it's funny because the same thing has actually carried through in the B2B space, because in B2B, sometimes we forget it's people on the other end making that decision, and people are, emotional animals. And so they make decisions based on emotion and they justify it with logic, but they've gotten sort of conditioned through the consumer experience as people that this is what choice looks like in the modern world. and I should have that same capability to choose not only, it's not just which ones are hot, but which one is hot and tastes the way I want it to taste. And when they look at business solutions, they want, not only is it the type of solution I need, but they're willing to engage with me the way that I want them to engage, which might be, I don't want to talk to a salesperson. And that's one of the things that really changed a lot during the pandemic is now as much as 70% of the buying journey is done before, companies will ever reach out to a vendor to talk to them. Whereas in the past, it was pretty common for a company to reach out to maybe the top 2 or 3 people and say, hey, what should I be thinking about here? Like, what are the things that matter when I evaluate? They might not go with one of those top people, but they would trust those salespeople as an advisor as part of their process. Whereas today, they're all the way 70% through their evaluation process. They've narrowed their list from infinite to 10, and then narrowed it again to probably 3 to 5 before they ever talk to any of them, which is a very different dynamic.
Oh yeah,
in space.
Yeah, it's amazing. There's a term for it. And now I can't remember it. It's got to do with the overloading of choice. You have so many choices that you really have no
paradox
choice.
of choice. Is that the phrase? You
Yeah.
think when you have more choices, people will be likely to choose one, but instead, when they have so many choices, they get sort of overloaded by the ability to choose that they just can't choose anything.
Yeah, we run into that with we try and explain that to a lot of clients who think that if they just keep adding SKUs, if they just keep adding products, flavors, variety, that they'll eventually get more and more clients. And we have one client who has they do some wall art type stuff. And they probably have, I think, 60,000 SKUs between color and size and shape. And we keep saying you have to narrow it because you've got so much that nobody knows what to buy, and they bounce off and they go to these sites that are more specific and more specialized, right? This one does just birds. This one does just sunflowers, and you've got everything, and you can't have everything.
It's funny you say that. Like, I've found myself on some of those sites with sort of like the endless variety, sort of feeling like, well, I really like this one, but there's another one that's slightly better, just 20 more clicks away. So I keep scrolling and I keep scrolling, looking for one that's slightly better. And it's very subjective. Whereas if I just come in and they'd be like, here are 3 excellent choices, pick one, and you're going to be happy with it.
Yeah. And then you forget where you first started and you can't go back. I do that too. I start going and I'm looking for something, and then I forget which one was the first one. Then I have to go back in my history and start looking for what was the first website that I was on. It's
next thing I know, I have 100 tabs open in my browser. I can't remember which one it was.
Yeah, it's amazing. But getting back to, it's true, the technology today versus when you first started versus when I first started is tremendous in trying to figure out who's coming to your site, what they're doing, where they're going, and understanding who they are before they even put anything on. And AI is also playing a role. I don't know how much you're doing with the AI side, but the tools that are coming out from the AI side, and we've used AI for a couple of years for different things. I'm a fan of using AI as an ideation tool. I like it for, writing content about 60-70% of the way there. You still need human eyes on it because you can't just take it out and start using it. I like it for writing emails to a certain point. Again, you still have to have eyes on it. I'm not a big fan of these tools that are out there, where they're just creating short form video to run as an ad, because I look at it and we've tested a couple and they they don't connect. You need
Yeah.
something, you always need to connect. I don't care whether it's B2B, B2C. You have to connect with the person that you're outreaching to.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. As you say, I see a lot of the solutions that exist on the marketplace today as, sort of a replacement for someone that's replaceable. If you think about it, like, if you've got people on your team that, well, if they left tomorrow, I could hire somebody to replace them. That's the level of work that AI can do today. And I think it's also, as we think about, what does AI mean? Machine learning frameworks and sort of decision criteria and sort of predictive models have actually been around a long time.
Oh, sure.
They just didn't get the spotlight until Chat GPT could turn it into a conversation.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to sort of see that that progression. It's funny. I know we were talking about UCLA earlier, and 10 years ago, I would teach a class on artificial intelligence and marketing, and all we would talk about was machine learning algorithms, and essentially like how that they're using that to make faster predictions or probabilistic models of, well, is this person shopping for this or for that? Well, we can get all these data points out of them, and then we can model what someone shopping for that looks like versus someone shopping for that, feed all that into a machine, and then it can run in real time. Like, that's what people talked about when they talked about AI. Whereas now it's, well, how much can we make it sound like your average fifth grader?
Right.
Which is kind of what AI does today.
Yeah. I have a friend who is actually creating a book for kids. And the beauty is that the user, the kid, can go in and sort of pick a hero, pick the story, and get a snippet of, say, his or her mom's voice. And
Okay.
they can AI will create the story,
Right.
and they'll create the characters, and it will do it'll do the images because it's more cartoonish and it's for young kids anyway.
Yeah.
But if if mom's traveling or dad's traveling and the child wants mom or dad to read them the story, that's where their voice comes in. And it's pretty interesting what they're doing. And I think it's going to be a very big piece, but that type of work in AI, I think is really neat.
It is neat. That's a really good use case for that. It's funny, like I've heard about some of the deep fake stuff and the ability to replicate a voice. And, there's even solutions out there in the B2B space where, like, have the CEO take every phone call, because we'll video what the CEO looks like when they present. We'll copy their voice. And then, every pitch is an animation that looks and sounds like the CEO, kind of going through a choose your own adventure script of how to demo the product. And then by the time customers meet the CEO, because it's the final negotiation or whatever it might be, they feel like they know him.
Yeah.
Where it's actually the first time that he's or she has actually met the customer, because they were using essentially a deep fake of themselves to go through the process.
Yeah. I think some of those things you can be creative and you can be neat with it. What I don't like are, I guess, the people out there that are just sort of preying on the uninformed or the uninitiated. Fire your marketing agency tomorrow and just use this system and it will create the ads for you across the board. And we actually have one of those systems that we've been experimenting with to create ads. Mm-hmm. And it will create a video ad, a 30-second, 60-second video ad. Amazing speed. It'll look at the website that you're marketing, and it will create it in amazing speed. And they look good, but I just don't think they connect. We've run them, we've tested them, we've changed the wording a little bit, but it just doesn't seem to connect with the end user. And so I don't think that technology, because at the end of the day, again, it just has to connect. It has to be something. What you're talking about is more personalization, which I think is really cool that you can do with AI.
Yeah, and the sort of the contrarian point of view is eventually we'll be able to distill all of those things that you do to empathize with the customer into data points.
Yeah.
And it would be a massive amount of data points. And then maybe that AI could do a good job of making that connection, of building that empathy the way that you can do. But it's one of those things that as a processing unit, the human brain is just so good at processing those kind of data points that you can incorporate millions, and you're not even aware of some of the ones that you're picking up on. You wouldn't even be able to distill it into a spreadsheet that an AI could look it up from, because you're not even aware that it's something that you're ingesting as part of the process.
Yeah.
But you are using that as part of your synthesis and calculus that creates, a magical ad that connects with the audience and persuades people to take action.
Yeah, I think that's on the horizon. I don't think it's there yet. I think people are out pushing a lot of AI tools. They go and make their own GPTs and come up with things and try and sell them. And I just don't think they were. I'm not a big fan of the images that are coming off AI. I don't see it yet.
Yeah.
But they'll get it. You're 100% right. I mean, it will just take time, but I just don't see it right now where you can just, go in and create images. I love the fact that you can there's a lot of things we can do. Chat boxes which answer questions, and because it'll scan the website and it'll be able to answer that question much more thoroughly. It'll but encourage someone to take action on your website. And I like all those things. I like the assistance of shopping on a website. What I don't like is people thinking that, okay, well, I'm just going to use this AI tool. I'm going to plug it in and all my marketing is going to be solved. You'll go broke that way.
That's right. and that's one of those things, like, chasing that magic bullet, that growth hack that's going to solve everything for you. I have seen, lots of examples, though, where you've built a system and identified a place where some automation or technology or data, maybe it's AI empowered, can fill a gap to make it go faster or make it go with less error. But it starts with that system.
Sure.
Which is just more complex than, most AIs can handle today.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's just such a big topic that it comes up all the time on everything we do. Even the clients, when we get on our prospective clients will say, well, what AI tools are you using? And you go, we use tools to automate and execute and improve the ROAS, especially on places like Amazon and things like that. But, everybody wants to know what tools, and then you have to, you get into an explanation of really what AI is and what it's good for. But, I don't think we're at the point where you can just push the button and it's going to create all your ads for you. And I think they ask that question because what they're really looking for is a better value in what they're spending. Because that's what I see as one of the biggest issues is there's a lot of firms out there that have been overcharging for a long time. And then today, what AI has done is allowed efficiency in certain areas that have reduced some costs.
Yeah.
A good example is we run a lot of ads on Amazon. We do a lot of work on Amazon for a lot of people. And we used to have to do it manually. You have to go in and you have to, sort of tweak the search terms and tweak the ads and make sure that they're targeting the right places and go in and make these changes. But there's new products out there that have come out in the last 2 years that really do that in a split second and really focus in on what you're spending your dollars on and allow you to optimize and maximize. And they've actually taught those systems, those tools have actually taught me a different approach. So I like them, but I like them for things like that. So.
Yeah, repetitive tasks.
Yeah,
that's a great use for a machine.
Sure.
And as you talked about earlier, first drafts. Go out and get me the 5 most common topics to talk about. For this, that's an easy thing for a machine to do.
Sure.
But synthesizing that into why do these matter? What's going to matter to my audience in their certain context right now? That's a bit of a leap too far for them today.
Yeah, I think so. But interesting nonetheless. So what's next for you? What are you doing now? And what's hot on your plate?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we've been trying to do is, our mission is really to sort of empower founders and leaders at early stage companies to grow, and to sort of take away, the fear of, will my marketing initiatives pay off? And, how do I balance all of these crazy things I could do to find the thing that I should do that's going to be worth my time and it's going to have that payoff for me, and not go crazy in the process. And so one of the things that we've done to kind of empower that is we built a diagnostic tool that's free. So actually, if any of your audience wants to go to modernrevenuestrategies.com/diagnostic, there's a tool there that they can go in and put in some details about their business. And then just about 20 questions, it'll diagnose the fastest path to growth. I will warn your audience that they aren't the easiest 20 questions to answer. So it'll be things like, what was your churn rate over the last 6 months? Or, what's your, cost to acquire a customer versus your lifetime value? Might be some things you'll need to spend a little time calculating. But then at the end, we'll generate a report that sort of lays out, hey, here's how you compare to industry benchmarks. So they can know, oh, well, we're doing pretty good here and not so good here. And then it kind of deconstructs that a little further to sort of recommend a path for growth, which we're really proud of that. And a lot of really prospective clients, because it's free and so you don't even have to hire us to do it, have said it's been really valuable. What took them 3 months and talking to lots of people to figure out where do I even focus before they can get in the course of filling out a 20 question sort of interactive survey. So that's been a fun thing to roll out.
What is it? modernrevenuestrategies.com/
diagnostic.
I gotcha.
I hope it came up. Otherwise, I'm going to have to. Oh, I thought you were typing it into the browser to see if it would.
No.
So we got the scroll. I love it.
If somebody wants to go to it,
Yeah, that's great.
I wish I had known that ahead of time. We could have put up a QR code and people would. But that'll work. Yeah, that's interesting. I'll have to test it and I'll get.
Yeah, I'd love your feedback. We also built, and again, talk about using automation. We built sort of a report that looks at your answers and then sort of has some initial, sort of results of, well, if you're in kind of this category, these are likely places you want to look. And if you're in this category, these are likely places you want to look. And so it can kind of automatically generate that report, based on your responses. And then we usually will schedule a free hour to walk through it with folks and say, hey, so here's what we saw. Is there, something else behind this? And kind of try to help them unpack their particular context, because all businesses have, unknown unknowns, skeletons buried in closets or, hidden out in the desert, something like that. But so we can kind of help them unpack that in the course of a short conversation. And then it gives them a real path of, oh, well, this is what I need to work on. Great. I can go do that. And then if they, need help doing some of those things, we can help them there too.
So when you get involved with a client, are you helping them do the outreach, the customization, the CRM, the automation tools, or are you just suggesting? Are you actually implementing, or are you just suggesting or writing out the path?
Yeah, we do both. So we typically will use the sort of diagnostic phase, whether it's as brief as that survey, and that's normally kind of the tip of the iceberg, to really sort of find what's the fastest path to growth. Is it on attracting more of the right prospects, which is, sort of going from anonymous targets in the world to a named prospect in their CRM? That's that portion of the critical customer flow. Or is it taking those named prospects and then accelerating them through the sales pipeline faster so that you've got, less drop off at each stage of the sales pipeline, shorter number of days at each stage of the sales pipeline, larger number of orders and larger number of, sort of revenue associated with each order? Or is it the sort of activating your existing clients for fast renewals, upsells, referrals, which is starting at that first contract, and then how do they become your best customer and the one that's out there advocating for you most loudly in the marketplace? And so we diagnose one of those areas, and then it's around sort of creating the systems that we can implement to create that acceleration. And sometimes we'll bring in an external partner to help with those systems, and we can work with either an agency that they've already worked with that they like, or we can bring in suppliers of solutions that sort of meet their needs and help them do it, or we can help them recruit, hire, and train people so they're building their internal capability. Because a lot of companies at sort of growth stage, they want to grow. And they don't want to outsource all of their expertise. They want to build their expertise.
Sure.
And so a lot of times we help them do that as well. But we can kind of work within those, three different scenarios. What's the old joke? You can have it, fast, cheap, or good. Pick two. And so like if you want it fast, using outside partners can be faster, but they tend to be more expensive.
Sure.
And maybe not as good. Maybe they're higher quality. If you want to build your own capability, well, that takes more time, and it might not be as good at first as you're starting to build it, but then eventually it'll be better than what anyone else could do, because those internal people know more about your business and care more about your business than any external person can. And so we help them try to understand their business goals to then build a path that sort of leads to accomplishing what they care about most, fast, cheap, or good, and balancing those, competing priorities to, really build a system that'll work for them. And really for us, it's all about those systems. We have a phrase, B2B growth system sets you free. Because once you've got that system, it changes the dynamic of your team, because instead of you wagging your finger at someone and saying, well, you didn't hit your goal for leads, you could say, well, our system didn't hit our goal for leads. Let's collaborate on it together to figure out what's wrong with it, which changes the dynamic at companies. And it changes the dynamic between marketing teams that are, maybe they're hitting their quota of marketing qualified leads, but sales isn't hitting their quota of revenue. Well, something's wrong. And instead of, them getting into sort of an adversarial conversation, it can be, well, our system for generating revenues isn't working. Let's collaborate on it together and figure out how we can improve that system, which really, sort of changes the perspective for teams.
I would agree with that whole piece that you just said, because again, just going from our own experience, we've been doing this for a long time, and we had a system that we could rely on over and over again up until, again, COVID. And after COVID hit, something just stopped working, and we couldn't figure it out. And we outsourced it to a couple of companies, one that was focused on LinkedIn and one that was focused on traditional, and neither of them really worked. And we started really paying attention and analyzing, and then we brought it all back inside with different tools, because some of the tools we were using had gotten outdated and just were old technology. But once we brought it inside, and then everybody started really paying attention and looking at it, I think we really started to focus in on where our problem was and how we were not speaking to our prospects in the way that we would speak to them if they were sitting in front of us. So if that makes any sense,
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's so funny that you say that, because so often, especially in B2B, where one person can control a large contract, and so that
Right.
individual interaction can be really important to the life of the business. But and also in B2B, people assume that, oh, everyone's making decisions based purely on logic and the benefits of the solution. Uh, when in fact, unfortunately, good ideas don't sell themselves, as you sort of said in your intro. And so we see so often that it's not the tactics of how you're going to market. It's the strategy of who are you talking to and what are you saying. That really is that's the difference. And someone was using this analogy the other day. I really liked it. I'm not a huge golfer, but I understand the idea that a 3-degree difference off the tee is hundreds of yards difference where the ball lands.
Yeah.
So that strategy of who you're talking to and what you're saying, that's that 1 to 3 degree difference that results in hundreds of yards off down the pipeline. You take that message to market and you spend a bunch of money trying to bring it to people, and then a certain number of people respond, and you have sales conversations with them, and nothing closes. Well, you weren't saying the right thing to the right people. That strategic piece, just being a couple degrees off, can make a big difference down the road.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And we see it all the time. And I have to tell myself all the time that I have to listen more, because sometimes I have a tendency of stating what the answer is or what I think the answer is before I really heard what the problem is. And so I have to, and I do have a weakness for doing that, because I think, well, I've already analyzed your business before with this call, and I've gotten on here and I see it, and I see what the problem is, and I have to stop myself from doing that, because you really have to listen to what people are saying, because you can damage the relationship by doing that right off the bat. Because as you said before, this isn't always about rational thinking. This isn't always about problem solution. This is about emotion. There are people at the other end. And if they feel like you're steamrolling onto them or not hearing them. So that's why I have other people who do different things. And by the time I get on, it's a whole different world. So.
Well, and you raise a really interesting point. We work with a lot of like boutique professional services, and consulting kind of fits in there, but a lot of different things fit in there. And there's an old phrase in that industry that those services can't be sold; they have to be bought. Meaning that the person that you're working with has to sort of come to a realization of, this is what I need. Now I need to go out and find someone that can deliver what I need in the way that I want it. And so, you can certainly highlight how you're different than competitors, and you can highlight how you're aligned with, their needs and what the way that they want to work with folks. But you kind of can't talk them into it. They got to talk themselves into it. And then, you can remove friction from the process for them.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's a good. I like that. I have to highlight that when we do clips next week of this show.
Sure.
That piece of it, because
I didn't invent the phrase. I certainly can't claim ownership of it. It's been around a long time, but it's definitely true, and something I try to remind myself of.
Yeah, I'm sure it's been around for a long time, but I'm sure a lot of people haven't heard it. But these types of things need to be bought, not sold, and that's an important thing. It's something that I have to now put in my brain, because I do a lot of calls, and I have to do a better job, because I'm always looking at myself and how I handle things, and I know the way I am, and I tend to be. I'm very good at analyzing a problem, and I'm very good at understanding it, especially since we've been doing this for over 20 years. So I know, I've seen, and I have to stop myself from just blurting out, well, your problem is this, and this is what we have to do. And
that's right.
You can't do it. So anyway,
there's some line from a movie where it's cops, and he's like, if you think the husband did it with the candlestick in the library, it was probably the husband with the candlestick in the library.
Yeah.
But in sort of selling services and helping people, you kind of got to get them to come to that conclusion themselves.
Yeah, you're 100% right.
Otherwise, they'll kind of never believe it. And the challenge if they don't believe it, like if you do convince them, sell them into it instead of them buying it, then they aren't committed enough to doing the things that they got to do to be successful. So you can, if you sell someone on a consulting service, then you can give them the best advice in the world, but they're not convinced. And so they're not going to do what you tell them, and then they're not going to get the results. And then they're going to go, yeah, I knew it wouldn't work anyway.
That's a good point. Listen, we're out of time. We ran a little bit over. We've got about 4 minutes to wrap this thing up. So first of all, how can people get in touch with you?
So if you're in a business today and want that free diagnostic, that modernrevenuestrategies.com/diagnostic, be happy to help you out and identify that fastest path to growth. If you're earlier in your business and trying to figure out how do I build the systems that'll sort of help us attract the right customers, accelerate those deals, activate existing clients, I'll give a free copy of the book, Are Your Leads Killing Your Business? To the first 50 folks from the show that go to modernrevenuestrategies.com/free download. First 50 folks get a free copy of the book, everything, including templates, calculators, everything they need to start to implement that in their business. If you download a copy of the book, I'm definitely going to reach out to you and thank you and get your reaction to it. So feel free to do that, or you can always find me on LinkedIn.
That's great. I'm going to put that also in the description because I'll put the free download in the description, and also some of the stuff we do next week, because what happens with these shows is evergreen content and people are going to watch this over and over again. The audience tends to build over a period of time. So I'll put that in, and I'll put your contact information in as well.
Fantastic.
I put some of it in already into the description. I put your website in and all that. So that'll show up on all those channels that,
thank you.
We're almost over on. So it was great. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I really learned a lot. I love doing this show because I learned so much from folks like you. So hopefully the audience learns as well. And it was great chatting with you. I really enjoyed it. And I hope to chat with you again.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Bill. Talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you. All right. Have a good night. Great conversation. Really a little bit different than we've talked about in the past, right? Most of the time we have people on that are creating businesses. They're selling products, selling a SaaS product or building an AI product or a consumer product, e-commerce. So this was a little bit different, which I enjoy, and a little bit different spin because it's B2B, but it's still marketing and it's still outreach, and the fundamentals are there. It doesn't change. You're still talking to people. And as Mark said, you're talking to somebody on the other end who's emotional. It's a person. And so I really think he hit some great points that we'll highlight over the next week. So appreciate everybody coming and watching tonight. Appreciate you watching on in the future. Again, if there's anything you need from me, you know how to get in touch with me, philmasiello.com, or you can get to me at crunchgrowth.com, and a million different ways. So always willing to help. Sorry to be rushing, but we're about 30 seconds into the end. So we ran a little over, got a little ahead of ourselves with the conversation. It was a great conversation. So good to see you all again, and tune in again next week. We've got some great ones coming up over the next couple of weeks. So thanks for joining, and we'll see you next week.